Okay. Morning, Delta. Few you're streaming today. Well, right. I'm happy for the relief. Um, how you doing? Soon to live in a house. Is that all going ahead? You got that all sorted? Go, pups. Last steps taken care of. Nice. Exciting times. It'll never be done. Houses take a lot more effort. Okay. So, I messed myself up. I uh I didn't stream yesterday. If I'd have streamed yesterday, next Tuesday would have been the 200th Liquid Sky stream, which is a milestone, which is good. Well, now it's Wednesday, so 97 today, 98 tomorrow, and 99 on Tuesday next week because of developers don't stream. So I might have to throw a Liquid Sky stream in there. Tuesday is my 45th birthday. Could have aligned 200 episodes of Liquid Sky. And the number nerd in me is like, we might do a Liquid Sky stream on Friday, not do developers that stream, just to make the numbers. Oh, your birthday coming up soon? Humbly Geek, good afternoon. How you doing? Okay. 15th. Nice. Nice. Yeah. The following week, I'm in Texas, so there'll be missing streams that week. But yeah. Okay. So, Liquid Sky. Um, I'm I'm trying to clean up the styling on this, um, just for the sake of uh, what's coming next. Running. Ouch. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Um, okay, so over the weekend, continued on with progress on Liquid Sky. Introduced the concept of teams, so you can now add a team, and I added a few teams in there. Today's goal will be to associate a user with a team. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to build out the planning items and trying to figure out how I would advise they be used, right? So, oh, joy. Did it like do the load error thing? I have that a lot on some streams where basically if I tab out or go somewhere else, the stream just dies and I have to restart. It's annoying. But once the Twitch believes that the bitrate is good, um, at 5.9K. Gotcha. Okay. Um, so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to add this stuff in and figure out what the pattern is. How does the development break down? How would I advise someone to use this product? And so I created this planning item for introducing teams, thinking it was a relatively small thing, right? Even me understanding what the development is, having done all the development, I still underestimated what it took to put this together, right? Because I didn't think of all the little niggly things, all the little pieces over here, over there, all the things I wanted to tackle. So I created a planning item for introduced teams, and I broke it down. Teams administration, sprints, creating a task, assigning tasks, filter the backlog, when the task drag, update the user, etc. And then assign teams to a user. So I broke all these things down and then started to think about it more. And I realized that what I have here is an initiative, right? Teams should be an initiative, and there should be a planning item potentially for teams administration with the requirements that I can add a team and I can see a list of teams, right? And those requirements then have components that tasks to them, because to get the ability to add a team, I had to define a team, capture the new team. Then it also has to come back around the other side. It has to be available in the view side of things, right? So if I was building this as a monolith, those steps wouldn't be quite as complicated, but they're still involved, right? I still need to make sure that I'm not only capturing, but I'm allowing query, etc. And then the UI, and it's not just define the UI for teams; it's provide an add button, provide a list, etc. Yes, yeah. Um, so so realistically, this planning item, this requirement could have been broken into two requirements and had a set of tasks associated with it, and that planning item would have been a little bit more, um, you know, uh, releasable as such. Because then introducing the teams administration would allow us to define teams. You could potentially release that, even if it doesn't do very much right now, the team's still there and you can move forward. But what I've done is I've created this planning item that has essentially an initiative in it. Right. So I'm not going to try and change it. I'm not going to introduce like, well, I can't change it because we have no concept to delete it, right? I'm gonna move forward and use it as an example of here's why this would be risky. So what I'm focused on now is, and again, priorities, right? So if I did have these as planning items, I could order them. I could highlight the fact that once I've got a concept of a team in there, doing a sprint doesn't make any sense, because I started to build this out, include the team on the sprint entities, assign the sprint to the team, but it don't mean anything because I can't do anything. I don't have a team as such. I don't have a user associated with the team. So there's no benefit in doing this piece yet because I can't associate a user with a team. Stoney, hello, how you doing? Um, Creating a task, assign it to a team. Again, I have no concept of a user being assigned to a team. So this has no value. Assigning tasks to sprints, you know, uh, uh, filtering a sprint by, you know, um, the team that the user is assigned to, right? What does that mean? Enjoy the nice weather. I'm good. I'm good. We're making progress on Liquid Sky. There's a product, a team, and the planning item. Teams. Yeah. Well, the idea of the user can be assigned to teams, plural. And any team you're on, you can see the things for. So the ultimate goal there is basically on this side of the house, when I'm seeing this, I can filter it by team. I can filter it by, you know, teams. And also when I'm selecting a sprint, I can only start sprints or see sprints that I'm allowed to see. Yeah. Yeah. So the fact that uh, a planning item exists outside of the sprint, outside of the cycle, means that you can have many tasks in here represented by different teams. So you can understand what it takes to get a single thing done over here. That's kind of, to me, that helps the visibility. We don't have to have split tasks and the same concept represented in different boards by different tasks. Um, yeah. So right now, what I'm doing is I'm adding. So, like I was saying, there's no value in any of these unless I can actually assign a user to a team or a team to a user. So this is the next priority. And again, if I'd had these broken out as planning items with individual requirements, then I could potentially have, several of them could have lined up together. They could have been part of the same requirement, right? Tasks to sprints, etc. They could have been part of the same planning item, but they would have had dependency upon this one. Be important that if it's a team that devs can see who the other devs are on the other teams, we're assigned similar planning items. Um, Ultimately, it wouldn't matter. I mean, you don't need to see anything. So if you're working on an initiative or you're working on a plan item, you understand what the other pieces are because you can see the planning item. You can still see the tasks. There's nothing stopping you from seeing the tasks. It's just what it offers you to, well, potentially, we'll go into permissions and stuff later on, but um, it potentially is, sorry, um, it's useful for you to understand what else is going on. But obviously, as a team planning out this requirement, you'd understand what was involved anyway. So yeah, if I'm Dev A on product A and there's Dev B on product B that is working on the same planning item, I'd want to know who Dev B is. Yeah, I mean, you'd still have a an idea of what the other tasks are, but you know what their task is. Um, like this, if this was built by a team that does UI and this was built by the backend team, you'd still see these two tasks. And the potential is you be included on both teams because it's useful for you to be able to see that other team. So that's why you can associate with multiple teams. We'll figure out the potential rules and overlaps there as we go. But there's no, right now, the concept is more one of assignment than it is visibility, right? So, yeah. So assigning a team to a user, define the user associated team. So this is kind of structure out the concept of associating a team to a user or a user to a team. Then providing an API endpoint to capture that so we can actually record that information. We now need to introduce on the other side. So you see I have this define a team in view, receive a team in view. This is a similar concept. Define assigned teams in view. So this is on the other side, on the actual view side of the platform. Oh, right, going back to the diagram. Morning, Mojo. This is assigning. This is so over here. The user is assigned to a team. I'm still not sure about this part because user management, we assign the user and the oh, this is why this is why I diverted. So I started playing around with a little bit of the styling on this component because I was stuck on exactly how I wanted to implement this. Now, there's no get ready to go into work early, and then my boss said nobody was coming in and I could stay home. Nice. Nice. That's cool. So tenant management has things like permissions in it. It has things like the tenant, the addresses and stuff. That's the administration for the tenant itself. Teams are kind of an organizational concept, and teams are added at the organization management level, right? Because they are more how the organization is internally structuring their groups. But a user exists over here. Where I produce this doesn't actually matter very much. It's just what I create, right? So if I create an endpoint in here for teams, or users, teams, whatever, assign, um, to be able to group a user with a set of teams. As long as that produces, the right thing, um, it doesn't really harm the system if I get that wrong slightly. I'm just kind of pausing over that design choice, right? Do I put it in here? If I put it in organization management, um, where teams lies, right? Then I have a user ID, a user identifier and team identifier. That's fine. I publish that out. However, if I change the user, it doesn't automatically trigger any Teams assignments, right? Only when the team assignment changes for a user does it actually publish that. Whereas if I update the user, and again, it's this is the most logical place to do the user assignment to a team, right? To a set of teams. However, is that the best way of doing it, right? Is it show the teams associated when you hit save? It's two calls, right? I got to figure out what I feel is the right way of tackling that piece. Also, that might become a toggle button up there. Because it looks horrible there. In fact, because I'm procrastinating and because I'm trying to get this right in my head, let's do that. Toggle button. P toggle button. So if we go to source, app, this is still in modules, unfortunately. I got to figure out reorganizing this. User detail. Right. Got to move that inside. Shouldn't make that much of a difference. Nope. And then let's add P toggle button. Okay. Oh, that's not right. Let's do this. So that is that control. Form control name is active. Oh, this is because that. Yep. Their code samples are not uh, 100%. No value control. It's fine. Some companies trying to move manual QA tests into development because AI can help or something. AI can help, right? Active, inactive. Can I change the color of that to like a highlighted color? Customized. On icon. I know I'm procrastinating here, it's fine. Active. That's that. Don't see the benefit in moving uh like more. It's the mythical man month, right? More people doing rubbish does not make better software. It does not make for more productive software. It makes for more bugs, more regression, less understanding, and more blame. I kind of want to highlight it green. That'd be nice if I could just highlight that green when it's active, and like a light red if it's not. That'd be awesome. And then move it over there. Oh. I'm just really bad at this flex thing. Um, hmm. Uh, justify. I wonder if is that. Hmm. I mean, basically, if I do that, what does that do for me? That collapses it in a weird way, so there's more. You're not going to like the answer. Kind of want to. Oh, style class. Class ng invalid. Mm. Yeah, but I want. Hmm. Vlogs, good morning. How's things going? Invalid state style is added using ng invalid ng dirty. Right, but that's. Yeah, it has. So So is it actually the reverse? Do I want justify? This is why I don't like CSS. Doesn't matter what it is, Tailwind, CSS, anything. I just don't feel like I quite grab my head around it every time. Um, Small. I mean, the size is a bit too big. That's fine. That's cleaner. Active, inactive. That doesn't make sense. That's the opposite way. Pi, lock, open, pi lock, active, inactive. There you go. Points points don't matter. Points. My team does 1,000,000 points, right? Because I point everything at 100. And relative scale, it's fine for you, right? Uh, Again, based upon how accurate you are. Guacamole. Good morning. How you doing? My coffee is particularly bitter today. Um, that than the chatbots, but oof. Right now I work for a company that doesn't have points. They do not even have a Git repo yet. More than welcome. So launched the latest version last week, right? So this is the latest version. So um in planning we introduced a new dashboard. You can now see the estimations on tasks. For a requirement, you can see the list of tasks available. The focus is not meant to be that you see the details of the tasks here, so that's why they aren't showing there. Who it's assigned to, what state it's in, and the estimated value. So you can see the planning items with their requirements. Initiatives were introduced in this piece, so you can group a set of planning items by initiative. Not yet, no, no. A lot of the things are being kind of figured out, right? So there's no product landing pages yet. But the sprint board being Kanban with some dates attached to it, it doesn't really have any sort of meaning as yet. There's no statistics, there's no burn down tracking, etc. You can see the task that you created and the requirement that drives the task. That's a key facet of this. Um, so here's what we tasked out, and here's the why we're doing it. Right. So yeah. Um, when you create the tasks in the planning board, right this second, this is not going to be the final iteration of this. When you create the tasks from within here, you are not able to assign points or assign who's working on it. Over here, you go in here now. You can put an estimate on it. You can assign it to a sprint, and you can assign who it's going to be worked on by. Over here, in the sprint, you can also edit and change who it's assigned to. You cannot change the estimation. Once you put it into the sprint, the estimation is the estimation is the estimation. You do not get to change that. That is by design. You should not be messing with estimates once you've put them into the sprint, because that's it. But yeah, it's starting to take shape. So what I'm working on right this second, well, apart from faffing around with UI, because I'm trying to get my head around a design, is where I'm going to put this, the teams. So introduce the concept of teams. So now the idea is that you go into the users and you'll be able to assign the teams that that user is attached to. But I decided to mess around with a bit of UI UX first, just to clean that up. And my brain doesn't work well with Flex. But if you're new to the stream, you have any questions, please feel free. Or not new to the stream. I should just remove that if you're new to the stream. As always. Does Loki need a job? Loki does need to be working a bit lazy. Justify and is that it? Is it that simple? Am I just being dopey? Justify and then remove that and remove that. I don't think so. Yeah, see, that's not what I want. I want left align text with. So does that mean item center? Stretch one. What's the other one? That's not that. That's not what I want, because that's when you are condensing things down. I never do well with this. Justify items. Left, right, left. I want grid. Grids aligned along the inline axes. It's not justified between them, is it? That's it. Justify between. Okay. There you go. And that is a field, so that would save. Active. There you go. Cool. So what I'm debating, so to be clear, this doesn't actually matter what I do here, right? All that matters is what triggers the change. So if I put this in tenant management, teams lives in organization management because it's an organizational concept, not necessarily a tenant related matter. Users belong to the users associated with the tenant. So that's why they're in tenant management and why I split this up in the original. Projects are managed in organization management. Teams are managed in organization management, but users are associated with tenant management. If I update a user, I will not be able to, if I don't put it in tenant management, I will not be able to associate the teams with that user. What I mean there is when I edit the user and publish and save, the teams that are associated with that user won't change. So only a change to the teams would republish that piece. But I think it's the right design to put it into the organization management rather than tenant management. It means that this form is going to be slightly weird in that it's going to do two calls, but I don't mind joining the concept visually and having the concept logically separated. I think it's a cleaner design. So let's do that. Again, we can always reflect on it later. So I'm going to go and go to the tasks, provide API endpoint. Am I really sending with test user? Let me make sure I know who I'm going to sign logged in as. Apparently, it's not my day for typing that password. Tasks. Interesting. Oh well. Publish user integration. No, publish teams integration. And then that's not the same thing. Um, um, so this would be a different integration event because now we'd be associating users with teams. This would be publishing user teams integration. It wouldn't be user integration event. That would be bad because then, because this this technically owns teams integration, user integration, user teams integration. Okay, let's go back to that. Dog food in the application is interesting because you've got to be careful you don't jump down this rabbit hole. Oh, I need to fix this. Oh, this would be really useful. Oh, I'll do that. So what I'm trying to do is make sure that even if it's painful or it's not as comfortable a flow as I want, I'm not reacting to it. I'm trying to decide what I would expect to do or how I would expect to use it. Oftentimes when you're doing something like this, it's easy to just keep throwing features in and just jamming them in and committing them, etc. But the problem comes with that is you, your development, you lose control of development. So I'm just trying to make sure that everything's validated. Okay. So provide the API endpoint that is that piece. Define the user associated teams. That's configuring them. However, that probably needs to change as well. Identity for user team in organization management. Associating user identifier with team identifier. Create script for defining table for user teams. That's that part. And then Um, define. That's a little bit temperamental. Define um, user team in view. So this is the other side of this now. This is this piece receiving that user team. Um, uh, create user teams table. Um, user ID, team ID. Define entity user team. Create script team. Define view entity. No. Update user view entity. So view is an overloaded term in the application. I get it. I understand that it's difficult. Um, there is the concept of a SQL view. There is the view, which is literally meant for the display. It's the GraphQL piece, really. It's not view. Um, it's not that it's too hard to change, it's that it's too hard to name appropriately. View in this concept is the entity for the user represented by a SQL view, right? To include teams. There's no change to the uh, user view here, I don't believe. So, and what I do is I use the views for the actual SQL views to query the data. So you're never actually querying the table, you're always querying via a view from the GraphQL side, which means we can, do calculation or manipulation of that data and condense potentially what is many tables into single objects. And this is one of those cases where there's not going to be a Teams view, there's not going to be a user Teams view because the user will have an association. So we have the user ID, so we can join on the teams, and then we don't need to make any modification to this view. He says that tables. No, we can just join the teams view. Teams view should have its ID. So we can just join. Uh, mm, he says, what I've generally tried to do is keep the views only querying views directly. So you don't need to have a blur because the update context and the view context are all in the same project, right? They probably don't need to be because the update side of the house doesn't need to be that complicated. They could probably be split out, and they probably should be to avoid these overlaps. It doesn't hurt to expose the update context tables to the view side. Again, everything's read only anyway, so not really concerned over that, but more uh, the blurring. So where I'm going there is I probably need to create a user teams view, um, which is kind of silly. It's a joining view, which um, yeah, yeah. Let's do it that way for now. Again, design can change. Um, don't need to overthink it. Create script for user team, update user view entity to include teams, create script for user teams view. That'll pull the ID. I have any examples of doing that? Actually, I'm trying to think about it. Seems messy. Not sure I like the concept there, right? So again, there's a view and then there's the entity. The entities here don't necessarily align or don't have to necessarily align with what's here because these can be kind of joins. Has encountered a slowdown. Oh, because SonarQube's still running. Whatever. Um, so this has permissions, but these user permissions are these user permissions, right? Because the view is going to pull different information. In this case, this is probably one of the stranger associated attachments. You see, that has a bit more information on it. Associated project has that. And then a user, planning item has associated projects, associated attachments. We end up with an associated teams view. Yes, I do. Yeah, create script for associated teams view. That will be user ID, team identifier, name. Okay. I think that's it for define user team in view. So we've got a new model for user team and a new view. Yep, no worries. And create the view. So technically that comes after that. Right. So we create that. So there's actually kind of a clear practice to the development of this platform so far. You define the thing that you're going to capture. You script out all the pieces. You then go through the API piece to capture that thing. Then on the other side, on the view aspect of it, you define a new piece to the view, and then you actually do the receipt of that data from the integration event and capture it. Now you can provide the GraphQL piece and then the UI, right? So the UI could be worked on in parallel, right? The UI could technically, well, no, the UI could actually be worked on completely separate to this. You could mock all the data and it would be fine. But the pattern is pretty repetitive, um, to the point where I think that, I know that I spent a while planning this morning, but it's kind of the focus, right? I do want to make sure I'm planning these things out, but I feel that I could probably make really good progress now, knowing what I'm doing. Um, receive user team in view. So this is create receiver for user team integration. This is that integration event we've previously defined. So we're now going to create the receiver side of it. This is to make sure that we record that information in here now. So once this event publishes that a user team has been updated, this piece will integrate that data. Create, update, user team, application how in depth did I go on this last time? I feel like I didn't go too in depth. Define a team, receive a team. Create an update team, command handler in view application. So here you go. So create, yeah. Create user comes later. Create update user. So hold on. So create update team command handler and view application for integration. Should acquire team ID, user ID. Right. So this is wiring those pieces up so that the receivers happen. Receive is, for anyone who hasn't seen that before, is a consumer, a Kafka consumer, but labeled as a receiver is it's an abstraction just to keep that a little cleaner and also separate it from service bus, which this application does have the concept of as well. As the system becomes more complicated, as actual events need to be transmitted between components to tell them things are actually happening. I'm using Kafka for state transfer, not for eventing. I want to use service bus for the eventing part. So as the system grows in complexity, things like, oh, this status changed. Oh, this particular component, was updated, and you need to know that this particular thing happened. Those sorts of events are going to be used to enrich the system's behaviors, because other parts of the system are going to need to react to them rather than necessarily figuring out for themselves, right? I don't want every single part of the system having to figure out, oh, why did it change? What changed? It can be inferred. It wouldn't be too difficult, but then having more eventing in the system is going to be more explicit. And what might happen is I might get to a point where I start to realize that the Kafka integration events aren't necessarily always required if we can do an event. Integration events help for things that just capture the data, right? So the view just captures the data. We're integrating the data. It's fine. The changes, again, we're just integrating the data and doing the calculation on what changed so we can do more notification stuff later down the line. Those things do benefit from having that state and that calculated events rather than the actual individual components being responsible for telling them user label changed, this changed, this changed. We can figure those things out, but later on we can use eventing and reassess that. Discovery. Okay, so let's go back there. So now when we've received that, technically, we don't have to do anything on the GraphQL side because the user has the teams associated. So we don't need to change that. We just need to um, update user UI to accommodate teams. Accommodate. Yeah. Now, technically, I start at the capture side, but this is now going to allow us to do both the setting and getting of those fields, right? So define should be able to navigate to a user and assign one or more teams to that user. Should be able to clear all the teams. Should be able to see the assigned teams when navigating to the user. Right. Define tag control for well, auto complete control for teams, i.e. dependent. Oh, e.g. not i.e. Update. Now this is a bit weird because the user store now is going to send two different endpoints. I'm okay with that. I think it's a very valid thing to try and not. I'm worried about bundling too much behavior in some of these endpoints, like just doing too many things. This way, if the user update succeeds and the team update fails, the user update still happened, and you've still not lost everything. If you make it all one big thing, not only do you increase the likelihood of it actually failing because you're doing way more in any request, but you then lose everything if it fails. So yeah, define auto complete control for teams, update, create method to call user teams endpoint, update store, update user to also update teams. We can kind of figure that out. We might be able to avoid calling that if it's not changed, right? So yeah. Update store, update user to also update teams. Update GraphQL to query team with user. And this is a big advantage of doing this. I can hold the stored data, the actual source of truth data, wherever I want to hold it, because I'm consolidating it on the UI. The UI is representing how I as a user might think about it, but the actual backend storage and manipulation of that data doesn't matter to me. And that's what this GraphQL layer does give. And I kind of like it. We can store things appropriately for their data types. Update GraphQL to create a team with user. Yeah. If we make this a form control, it will handle that by virtue of it being included. Okay, so there's our tasks. We now go over to our tasking, and what we're going to do. Interesting that you're labeled as test user until I do that. Huh. Welcome back. So as an administrator, I want to be able to associate teams with the users. Wow, it's loading the same requirement for everything. Awesome. That's interesting. It loads the first one and it doesn't load another one. Oh, but it works for that one. Oh well. New endpoint for associating user with teams. There's a bug. If I refresh, what you'll see is everything kind of updates a little bit because now, um, apart from that, it doesn't want to load that. New endpoint for associating users with teams, application handler to associate teams, publish teams updated. Now, I'm not going to look at what I did last time. I'm going to put this estimate on here. That feels like there's a missing task. There's 5 there. Define user associated teams. There you go. Identity for user team in organization management. Associating a user identifier with the team identifier. Create script. So I'm going to say that's our 1. That's going to get assigned to me. Radio Patrick, hello, good morning. How you doing? And provide API endpoint for associating. So the application handler, we're going to update that object. It's going to publish the team's updated event. And yeah, update the user team's integration. So we're going to define a new event there. So that's a 2. Then on the view side, creating the script, setting the entity, creating the view entity. I'm going to say that's a 3. I'm awake against my will. I've been up since 3:30, so I get that. Then receiver, so the receiver part of this should be literally just updating the entity, acquiring the values, and then, yeah, storing that. So I'm going to say that's a 2. And then update the user UI. So changing the UI out for the read write. I think that's a 2 as well. Okay. So if we go back over to planning and go here now, this won't update immediately. There's still some issues with eventual consistency there. So that will get there, but there we go. We estimate that as a 10. We estimate teams administration as an 11, so it kind of follows. So let's just go back there and assign that to the sprint. So assign that to 3. Assign to sprint release 05. So the intention is here, by the way, that this version, this next set of changes will be deployed in May. So teams will be in May. Release. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So now go over here and go to this release. And I already moved the sprints over. Then I realized, yeah, I accidentally went to bed at 1 again, and it's killing me. Might have to set up some bedtime alarms. The older you get, the harder that's going to get. Okay, so define user associated teams. So this is the first part, right? So we're going to move that over to here. And we're going to start on this side. Let's stop running. If you are new to the stream, if you have any questions, thoughts, opinions on what I'm doing, please feel free to share. No pressure, but I'm always open to talking about this stuff. I think it's very important. So, yeah. Feature, what is this? This is associate user with teams. Might as well check out that as well. Feature, associate user with teams. Could I have done? I could have done both there, yeah. Okay. That's what that drop down does. Okay. So, task number 1. I'm going to move this over here now so I can kind of keep an eye on it, but yeah. Add entity for user, team, and organization management, associating a user identifier with a team identifier. Create a script for defining table. So again, we're going to put this in organization management, not tenant management. Even though the user exists in tenant management, that is a tenant concern. Permissions for a user, capturing those is all part of tenant management, but this is kind of just an association. So we're going to go to domain, entities, um, user, team, association. Mr. Jones, good afternoon. Hope you are well. Now let's go with that. We can always rename something, right? This is going to have public int entity. It's going to be an entity base. And then it's going to have public period user identifier and public period team identifier. That's it. Now, it just so happens that it could look up the team by ID, but it doesn't really matter. This is, you could look this up in here, but you don't need to. And so there's no need to have an ID on this because it doesn't need to acquire the ID to be valid. It's relational just by chance. It's not really relational. These are essentially different data stores. The benefit of this is I'm just storing the data. Everything's right optimized, or can be right optimized. It's not optimized at all right the second. But I'm kind of grouping here. Thank you very much for the follow. Appreciate it. Okay, so that's that part. So let's go to the organization management database, and now we'll create a new table. User team associations. New column ID in. This is identifier. This is a shared identifier that identifies this pairing of information. We likely will publish this, but it's not necessarily required. New column, user identifier. It has entity base, implicitly has a ID identifier, date added and last updated. If you haven't seen this before, I do realize that ID is short for identifier. ID is used as a primary key on a table. It's normally an integer for me. And identifier is a publicly shareable, unique identifier that is transmitted around the system. That way, every data table has its own internal ID for each database, whereas identifier is going to be shared. So you can trace data through the system that way. So that's a unique identifier, not null, and then a new column, and that's team identifier. Again, I could put team ID on here and validate that the team exists within this database, but it's not the purpose of this database. This database is used to store and organize data by kind of concept. These things can move around just as easily. So if I decide to move this to tenant management, or I decide to move this to a team specific area later on, I can do that. And it's not going to break the entire system. Unique identifier. They added. not null, and get UTC date. That default does not matter in Entity Framework unless I set it explicitly. And again, if you have any questions, thoughts, opinions as I go, please feel free. There's no harm in diverting and talking about stuff. Okay, so we script that out. We go over here. I'm not using migrations. That is a deliberate choice. Migrations get messy, and with this many databases and this many pieces, it will get nightmarish if one of them goes wrong. So I'm not messing with migrations. It does mean that I have to manually pair these in, but that's okay in my world. I'm fine with that. There we go. So that's part one done. Right. So we define our table, we define our script, we can commit that. We could make a PR against that. I'm not going to make a PR against that. Define user team associations and create script. Or create commit. So that is that task done. I'm moving it to complete. Obviously, that's not merged, released. The statuses is another area of the application that I'm going to change, right? I'm going to introduce user definable statuses because ultimately I want to be able to generate workflows off them. So you can say, okay, when it moves to this status, this thing happens, this thing triggers, etc. That's not possible with hard-coded statuses everywhere. But got to get the concepts down. Okay, so this is now provide API endpoint. So a new endpoint for associating user with teams, application handler to associate teams. This is going to be where I'm going to test that kind of my comfort level with that concept, right? Where I'm going to say, does this really make sense? Let me do this. Let's see if it refreshes and pulls the actual requirement. There you go. So the intent here, by the way, is that the requirement should have loaded. I'm not sure why it's not. It was originally more consistent. But the idea is that I can see the why. Why am I doing this? What goal am I trying to meet here? So let's go. So in organization management, we have an endpoint for teams, and we post to teams. So do we create another endpoint for posting to teams with a user ID? What's the right way? I'm not too concerned about being very restful here. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a new endpoint. Users. And what am I doing? Add class post. Right. We're going to copy this a second. Okay, let's comment out that. And let's import the rest. Okay. Endpoint import missing references. Okay, so this is going to be users ID teams. Yes, that's what we're going to do. And parameters here is going to be public IEnumerable period teams, right? We missed a piece on the planning, right? And again, the reason I'm dogfooding the project, obviously, I mean, if it's not very obvious, is by dogfooding the project, I'm actually understanding the weaknesses of it as well. And I'm validating the assumptions I have about the process. Now, I'm not a project manager. I'm not a product manager. I am a developer. So my focus is going to be really on what I want to receive. But at least dogfooding it allows me to test these things. New endpoint for associating with your teams. Update gateway for new endpoint. Now this piece is a little bit more difficult because one of the things I struggled with this latest release was understanding the pieces I'd missed. There is no, being that the gateway has the routes defined in the app settings, this is a particularly tough one because there's no way of tracking that. I've got to remember that the gateway needs updating. DVD, have you ever had to use C# concurrent dictionary or any of the concurrent collection types? I found a part of the code base at work that is absolutely littered with them for no apparent reason. I spent a bunch of time looking up what the heck they even were. Not often have I used concurrent dictionary. It's just a thread safe version of dictionary, so it will deal with the locking and stuff around it. So it could be slightly slower because it's doing the locks and stuff on reads writes. Oh yeah, on writes. Yeah. Stranhorn. Good day. How are you doing? Okay, so place them in the modern code landscape, I guess. Yeah, absolutely. Concurrence. Especially in a web environment, if you've got some data that is shared between contexts, then yeah, absolutely, you have a need for that. Using for scripts heavily, yeah. There's plenty of places where you would have to be concerned. Just using a normal dictionary will not, you can just replace the values or get conflicts there very quickly. I don't do much concurrent code in my current form, but yeah. Yeah. So one of the areas where I deal with potentially having conflicts, right, is on this side of things, on the view application side. This acquire is acquire base in here. I think acquire base is acquire base, yeah. So when you acquire an entity, the idea is that you need to, you could receive the event multiple times, or you could ask for the same piece of data from multiple handlers at the exact same time. So let's say 3 pieces of data came in and they all need tenant ID. They're all going to potentially request getting the tenant ID at the same time. So you have to write this code, right? So async await, the original lock, new lock in .NET 9, I think it deals with it better now. But the original lock does not deal with task async await. So you have to create a semaphore. And this allows you to have X number of processes request it at the same time. So you have to await the semaphore and then, release it when you're done. So this allows me to deal with that thing. So concurrent dictionary, the same thing. It does a lot of this stuff for you, where it will deal with the asynchronous nature. A lot of the code base weirdness is a question of, is it my ignorance? Is it bad student code? Or is it code from an old C++ dev who was working the early code base? I mean, it's worth thinking about the use case, like understanding, are they using concurrent dictionary just because? Are they actually sharing that data? What does the data look like? If it's a web app, then uh, if the thing that owns a dictionary is transient, then you'll get a new version every time. So you might not need concurrent, but I would uh I would assess it against its use case rather than assuming that it's not meant to be there. Okay, so we need API users. So you see how we have users, whatever. That's going to be a problem. I do user teams routes. This is where I find out whether it cascades or not, because this route naming could be challenging. Match path API users ID teams. So what I'm going to do is, before I even play with this, I'm going to I'm going to validate that route works. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to have a post response here. Um, no, there's no benefit in this one. So normally what happens is that in a post, if I'm posting to an object, I return the identifier of the thing, which means I can confirm to the client, yeah, by the way, this is how you're going to refer to this object. In this case, I'm saying update this list of teams. There's no point in posting back the IDs of the associations, because I'm not managing that on the client side. I'm just saying it's a bunch of teams. If I send it up again with different teams, I'm just going to say, okay, well, replace what's there. Um, and just do okay there. Yeah. Um, does it really not want that? Oh, it doesn't want the optional. Okay. For some reason, it really likes you to name the thing the same as the base. Is it going to make a difference? But okay. Just get rid of the yellow squiggles. I just hate the yellow squiggles. So I'm going to run. I guess I'm going to run the project. Um, right. So I want to validate the endpoint. I'm not messing around with permissions. I'm not creating a token just to do this part. Coffee is particularly bitter today. So I believe HTTP request post. Well, I need to post to the gateway, not to the 7285 users in an actual GUID. None of this really matters very much, but might as well have a real user ID just in case. We'll post to Bob. Bob Teams. And the body will be JSON. Oh, by the way, I'm doing this. Okay. My concern is it's going to go to the wrong endpoint. Yes. Oh, no, wrong. Second, 1 second. API users. So, actually, hold on. Let's put the transform in there and do it right. Users ID teams. Say, does that the JSON value cannot be converted to a security? Yeah, I think it's passing it to the wrong. I think it's passing it to this. So how do I deal with YARP reverse proxy configure routes to go to by pattern? I want the catch-all, that's the problem. Well, I actually do. I've got a very specific route here, haven't I? Is it the fact that I'm not using the right? Well, hold on. Before I do that, let's restart that gateway and make double sure that I'm not being dopey. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so that's endpoints user, because I think that's getting to this endpoint, right? Well, it's clearly not because it's not getting to that piece, but I think it's getting there and not to this one. We're having some issues there, aren't we? There you go. So configuration filters. No, configuration files. I think ultimately what I want to do is get the things are wonky. I want to get the configuration held somewhere different. I don't want it from, yeah, load from memory, load from routes. Okay. Load from config may be called multiple times to reference in different configuration sections, or maybe combined with a different config. Also, like reference clusters from other sources. So yeah, routes, clusters. So how do we define parameters? So catch all. Route config. Match. Parameters used to match requests this field are required. As is always the case, Microsoft. Where do the examples live? Like extensibility, configuration. That's not protocols. Getting started with YARP. Like that's not enough to go off of. Complete version of the project. Okay. Now everything's stopping and running. Awesome. There shouldn't be 18 either. There should be 17. Phil Shamble, hello. How are you doing? Configuration filters? No, that's different. YARP config variables. Current dictionary is really useful if you need a dictionary that's safe to use from multiple threads. Yeah. Ouch. Apologies for the bright screen. No. Also like the API in that they have atomic get or add ops. Yeah, I was saying I haven't had much need for concurrent dictionaries specifically yet. What I'm wondering here is this a path matching problem first, right? Because yeah, because that's is that is it kind of like what does the star star mean, right? That's is that variables? Is that yeah? There's not performance overhead for read, if I remember correctly, as it doesn't use lots on reads, only writes. Yeah, my assumption would be what it would be marginally slower than a regular dictionary because it's going to have to do those locks around it, either the semaphore or the internal lock. The proxy config is invalid. Okay, so that's incorrect. Uh, so what is a how do I look at? Surely I can send them in different directions here. It might introduce a memory barrier and read, but to be honest. So the case that Patrick was talking about is like there's code there, but doesn't know if it's necessarily required. So is concurrent dictionary overkill or not? You have to look at the actual scenario around it, right? Oh, come on. The most specific routes having highest precedence is described here. Come on. Servers. Come on. I want her. And like some nice API operations that are not available on dictionary. Nice. Servers. Yeah. App overview. Config filters. Did not want to get stuck on this right this second, but it is what it is. Pause, destination resolvers. Rate limiting transforms, WebSockets, YARP, overview, getting started. That's what I want to do. Cluster config, that's what I really, no, whatever config files. Routes. What file do you think you go into? Let's have a look. Fundamentals routing. Oh, but it's not in there, is it? It's not in here at all. They think it's here. Routing. Samples. 8x. Optional params. Program CS. What? No, but it doesn't. It's not using the same technique, is it? As far as I'm aware, it's not. What do you mean? Does a spy not show me what? The trace from where I'm trying to get to an API. The routing is Aspire is not going to trace the internal routing configuration, is it? I just know that I'd hit the wrong API. Aspire is, unless I'm wrong, and Aspire is providing debugging into the routing of the gateway, which I'll be more than happy if it does. Okay. Also, that's back up and running. Okay. So what I'm looking to do is, if I go here, gateway is not in there. Gateway doesn't have service defaults. Uh, Request finished. Execute endpoint. Okay, it's going to the right route. Post. So that is enough to get it to the right thing. Let's have a look at the application though. Make sure the application is still running. Teams, users, um, active, create project, save. I think we might have to do some changes here. There's some UI changes that need to happen alongside everything else. Not good. That failed. The log say it was forwarded. Yeah, the users route, executed users route, API users. So it got to the right thing. So the Teams one definitely went to the right thing. It's my request that was hold on. Okay. So here we go. So if I post, there you go. It went to users team route, which is fine. That's exactly what I want it to do. It posted to the right thing. If I go to the user and hit create projects and hit save, we get to the users route, it forwards to the users. Yeah, it's fine. But I'm not sure where that 400 came from. Why you've given me 400 there? Why does one post or put to users yield all of that? That's weird. Yeah. That's probably why, isn't it? Headers. Oh no, it's dealing with that. Stats code. Oh, that's the 400. I suppose. Yeah, that is a bad request. That's causing it to give that back. So that is a genuine 400. But why are you getting a 400 back? You shouldn't be getting a 400 back at all. So Amelia. Okay, it's saved. I'm not going to panic about that piece. It's not really something I need to be scared about right this second. It's just, it would have been nice to figure out. Okay, so the route works. That's what matters. So that slowed me down significantly, but it was worth validating. And before I forgot about it, and it looks like what YARP does, it will order by most specific. So even if I put them in a different order, it's not. I think it was Ocelot was very specific about cascading down those things. Okay, so that is define endpoint for updating user teams. And again, if I decide to move this to organize it to tenant management later for whatever reason, then that endpoint goes straight across as is because it's still you, and I just redirect which cluster it goes to. again, with the way this has been developed, it doesn't matter if things move around or get redefined later. Updating user teams and configure in gateway settings. But that is a piece that's going to catch me out later on. There's no good place to put that right this second as a configuration goes. So with that done, what we need to do is associate teams to a user, right? Teams associate with user, right? This is going to be public record command, GUID user identifier, IEnumerable GUID team identifiers, and GUID source user identifier. This is a result. It's just a command that has a source user identifier attached to it. So it's just a abstract base that's got that to force it. Just showing intent that I really want a source user. This is the user performing this action versus that. Now, permissions wise, we didn't cover the permissions. This kind of carries under edit user, right? Create users, delete users, read users, list users. We do not have edit user, right? So public static read only user permissions. I thought I'd rename this to user permission. Hmm. Hmm. Please tell me, Brian. I did pull this code. Did I just decide to not? I've got a feeling I did not pull. This overwhelming feeling of I've got to check that now. No, apparently I didn't rename it. Okay. Yeah, okay. Either way, edit users equals. So the concept here is actually I can tell you whether this is going to be, yeah, permissions initialize the service. So what will happen is as I do that, um, edit users, edit users. By defining this, what will happen is when the application starts up, there's three services that all require permissions. They'll check this list and say, I don't have these permissions yet, and they'll create them automatically. Well, not automatically. They'll create them because this service runs and initializes them for themselves. So it'll capture whatever information, which means this GUID is now the GUID. It does mean what I can do there is now on this side, I can just say, remove that and say that requires edit users, and now that's it, that's done. So that permission has to be attached. So we have a command, public class handler, I command handler, command result. And there we go. So I'm not gonna proceed too much with this right this second. I was hoping to get a little bit more done, but tomorrow, it's Thursday tomorrow, right? Yeah. By tomorrow, we'll have a lot more of this done. And yeah, the goal will be to get this working to associate with the user. So once we can associate teams with the user, we go to planning, introduce teams. Teams are now a usable concept. We can now say this user belongs to this team. So, creating the sprints and associating them with teams, creating the tasks and assigning them to teams, filtering the list so that you can only look at teams or sprints that you are a member of. That's useful if if QA has their own team and they have their own boards, then we can create sprint boards for QA and sprint boards for developers, and each can see the others. We can kind of create condensed views, etc. But yeah, that's where we are right this second. I think progress is going to improve. The planning is definitely there. Once this next set of features comes out, the teams and the sprints, etc., I think again we take an evolutionary step towards a more productive system. We do have the plan in this to do the planning task phase, which is really moving this tasks area, this tasking component out to the top of the development piece. Haven't quite landed on names for this yet, right? Because this is kind of the planning aspect and this is the task aspect. They're not like complete modules like Jira and Confluence and whatever, but they are separate aspects of the system for different intent, right? So the development part is that tasks component, so development aspect or whatever, and the planning and product management piece is this piece. So it's coming up with meaningful names for those things, but keeping that separation intact. So the planning task phase is moving that like this aspect to the development team and focusing it on here's why you're gathering this task, no pop-ups and things like that to try and make that smoother and much simpler. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's noisy. Okay. So with that said, I am going to I'm going to finish up here. Well, again, if you have any questions, if you want to talk more about this, if you have any questions about the design, you want to dig deeper, I'm happy to talk about it. There is a Discord linked in the cards below that you're more than welcome to join and engage in. We do hang out in voice chat there quite a lot during the day and the evenings. Um, I am contemplating increasing my stream schedule a little bit and reintroducing evening streams. I sit here programming anyway, so streaming it might not be a bad idea to keep me kind of focused and getting stuff done. But we'll see how that goes. Yeah, so tomorrow back on this associating the tasks. It is Wednesday, so do not forget. One Line streams Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays. One Line is a .NET developer and a Blazor developer, and is well worth going out hanging out with. So please drop a follow if you like .NET code. But for now, we're gonna raid maybe. I know we raided maybe. Nice. We're gonna raid maybe because maybe is doing app dev. I kind of prefer to raid into app devs rather than game devs because it's not as much for context switch. Maybe he's working on an application called Barely Fit, which is a fitness app, which he's working hard on getting to release. So I share something in common there. But anyway, thank you for joining me. I will be back tomorrow. Take care. Have a great rest of your day if I don't see you around Twitch. And go on. Bye all.